Welcome, it's me, Aaron the artist. Thanks for sitting down with me today for another relaxing art lesson. This time we're going to be drawing Anya from SpyXFamily. The only supplies that we need are our regular office pencil and also this black coloured pencil. We're going to start, as I often do, by drawing a circle. Now Anya's proportions are interesting in that the circle can be used pretty much just as her head as is without adding anything extra to it. I'm just going to add a few lines here to show where the different parts of her face will sit. From top to bottom we've got a horizontal line for the hairline right at the top of the circle, then we've got a line where the eyebrows will sit, then a line where the nose will sit, and then finally the bottom of the circle will just be where her chin goes. You can see that the bottom two segments of the circle are roughly the same size, and then the top two segments are significantly smaller. We're going to be drawing a little bit of Anya's body for this, and I'm just going to slow things right down so that you can really see what I'm doing. We started off with the shoulders, which in Anya's case are basically the same width as the head, certainly not much wider than that. And then we're going to add a simple box down underneath for her torso. But the most difficult part of this is going to come with the hands, which is why I've zoomed in on them here. You can see I'm going to draw a box just as a guideline for where the hand will sit. Note that the top facing section of the box will be where the fingers go. The left face of the box is going to be the back of the hand. And that connects up to the elbow down here on the left hand side. Notice how I first draw the hand, and then I draw where it connects at the elbow, and then finally I connect all of those things up to the shoulder. I find it easier to do this to get the hand in the right place than to draw first the shoulder, then the elbow, then the hand. I find it easier to work in reverse, placing the hand first where I want it, and then deciding how to connect up the joints afterwards. I will come back to the hands in more detail later, but the important thing to note is the way that we use boxes as kind of guidelines to get in where the hands are going to be. She's going to be in this very excitable pose where her hands are kind of closed and she's almost about to jump for joy, so to speak. Now that the most difficult part is over, I'm going to go ahead and put in a general shape for their hair. Anya's hair is a kind of bell shape that comes out well past the shoulders. For Anya's eyes, let's zoom in here. I'm going to be starting by drawing a kind of letter R. It's like the letter R, and then inside of the R, we're placing an oval for the iris. We're just going to do the same thing over on the other side, trying to make sure that they are the same size, both in height and in width. You can use the two guidelines that we drew either side to help you get the placement. Anya does have really big eyes, but notice crucially that she still has that one eye gap between the two eyes, and it's important that we maintain a distance of one eye width between the eyes. Her eyes are going to, in terms of height, take up pretty much that whole section between the two guidelines that we initially set up, with the nose sitting right on that bottom guideline, the eyebrows sitting just a little bit above. I'm going to be drawing a very excitable Anya with her mouth wide open. You can see how it comes almost all the way down to the chin. And then inside of that, we've conveyed the teeth and the tongue with just three simple lines. One line for the teeth and two lines either side for the tongue. I find it's better to use less detail with a cutesy character like this. Drawing too much detail in the mouth can start to look a little bit uncanny. We're going to get into the clothing now, and it's important to remember that the clothes need to wrap around the body, so we need to draw the lines a little bit outside of the body. Anya wears a pretty simple dress, at least in the screenshots that I was looking at of her. Just a pretty simple dress with a pretty straightforward design. The main challenge is going to be the folds on the arms, but we'll come back to that once we've drawn some of the other aspects of the character, because I think that those folds are going to be quite challenging. For now, as soon as we've cleaned up the guidelines, we're going to move on to the hair. Anya's hair does come down and cover her eyebrows, but some of the eyebrows will still be protruding out. The exact shapes of the bangs here don't matter too much. The main thing is just that big main pair of bangs in the center, and then the other pieces flowing towards the left and right. A fairly common way to arrange bangs, actually. These parts on each side of the hair are actually fairly important in terms of the shape. You want two large round sections that frame the face, and then you want the more spiky sections coming out in the back. When you draw the spikes, the important thing is that the spikes are not all the same size. We want a good variety of sizes and to try and go in slightly different directions at different angles as well. She also has these two little triangular accessories on top of her head. Now, we don't have to worry too much about these. We just need to make sure that they are roughly in line with one another. These aren't overly complicated, but now it's time to get to something which is complicated, and that would be the hands. Returning to our box guideline that we drew, you can see I'm going to use the top plane of the box as the first three fingers of the hand. We can use the plane of the box that's closest to us as the side plane of the hand. You can see how I've cut off the box a little bit as it connects back up to the wrist. The fourth and final finger, the pointer finger, I'm going to draw sticking out from the box as a separate thing, and then the thumb, a little bit of the thumb peeking out from behind those three fingers. It is a fairly common technique among illustrators to have three of the four fingers clumped together and then to have one finger separate. It just makes the hand look a little more natural. I quite often like to use the pointer finger for that. In terms of the clothing here, you can see that the collar of the sleeve has to wrap nicely around the wrist in that sort of cylindrical way. It's important not to draw that with a straight line, but with a curved line so that the idea feels more three-dimensional. I'm going to repeat what I just did over on the left-hand side with the hand on the right, again using the top plane of the box to get in those fingers, but this time I'm going to fit all four of the fingers into that top plane of the box, and I'm not going to have a finger sticking out. I think it can look more interesting to have the hands slightly asymmetrical, because naturally you wouldn't have your hands in identical poses, I don't think. Again, when it comes to the clothing folds, if you're struggling with the clothing, you need to wrap the clothing around the body. So whenever you draw the folds, they need to wrap around the form. And in this case, where the arm is basically a cylinder, so you can see that I'm wrapping the folds in curved lines around our cylinder. There aren't exactly specific places where the folds have to go. It's a little bit more random with clothing folds. There's no strict anatomy to it, but it also means there's room for you to design some interesting shapes. The final thing we need to do to complete our drawing is add the highlight and the pupil, and then we're ready to get on with some shading and perhaps some line art. I'm going to be doing my line art first using a black colored pencil. I'd like to start by going all the way around the edge of the character. Just with this thicker line, it really makes the character stand out and feel more like a finished, polished illustration. I'm not worried too much about line weights in particular here. I just want a thicker line all the way around the edge. Now that we've got that, I'm going to get on with adding the main dark areas inside the drawing, and those areas would be first the eyes. We want that eyelash to appear really quite dark. The pupils will also be fairly dark, and then there's going to be a shadow just underneath the chin, which goes this black tone as well. For the rest of our drawing, we're going to be using the plain old office pencil just to add the remaining areas of tone. We need to get a variation in tone inside of the mouth because, of course, that is a hole in the skull and it's going to receive some shadow. I'm trying to make all of my shading go in that same vertical direction as always. You can see me shading straight up and down. It just creates this nice graphic look. Now, if I have to add multiple layers of hatching, I will start to go in different directions. You can see for the pupils here, I'm going in a bit of a diagonal direction to layer up the darkness. But where we've got just one layer, it's just vertical up and down shading. A common mistake that I see beginners making is when they do this kind of shading, they apply the shading in all sorts of different directions. Some of it is going vertically, some of it horizontally, some of it diagonally. They sort of just shade in whichever direction is easiest for their wrist to go. Now, I don't recommend that because it can look quite chaotic. It's better to try and shade all in the same direction and only change direction if you are going to be layering the shading to create a darker effect. This way you get a real nice, clean, consistent, more visually appealing finish to things. Now, if you find it difficult to shade all in the same direction because it's perhaps not going in the natural direction of your wrist, you can just turn the image so that you can still shade in that same direction, but the angle goes more naturally with the way that your wrist naturally wants to pivot. I'm not rotating the image when doing this. I'm just sort of struggling through some of the more awkward angles, but that's only because I don't want to keep rotating the image during the video. I'm starting to add a little bit of additional shading to her dress, and I find that when you add the shadows, it's easier to draw out the shape lightly that you want to shade in first, and then to go in afterwards and fill that shape with the hatching, as you can see me doing now. As we move into the hair, her hair is actually a fairly light color. Anya's hair is pink, and I'm going to leave most of it the color of the paper, but I just want to get a bit of shading in the back section of the hair where it starts to move back behind the skull, because that area would be more in shadow. I used to struggle a lot with this kind of shading that you see me doing now, where the shading is in the hair but taking this kind of very graphic zigzag shape. I used to struggle with where the shading was exactly supposed to go and how you were supposed to place it. And what I've come to find over time is that there's not really a strict rule about where it goes. You need to try and roughly follow the light source. So here, for example, you can see that the light is coming from above. So the light is casting shadows on the hair as we get lower down the hair. But there's no fixed rule as to what the shapes should be. You're just looking to make some fairly interesting graphic designy shapes. We're very close to the end of this illustration here today. I'm just going to kick things into a slightly higher gear time lapse to finish things off. You'll see me going back and forth between the office pencil and the black colored pencil. Not really adding anything new, just polishing everything that we've already got down. Alright, and that just about does it for our drawing of Anya. I do hope that you learned a thing or two about drawing from me here today. If you want to see my personal artwork, you can see that over on YouTube Shorts. Until next time, folks, have a nice day.